in the as you would see, the results are slightly on the higher side, above 3.924 and 3.97. So indicating that students were well prepared for the project. Then next slide. Cultural diversity and preparation, which is the key theme that we wanted to achieve in this project, to see if they are able to interact with different cultures. For DUT students, why cultural diversity is important is because they are healthcare professionals who are going to be dealing with students from a diverse background, and the XJTLU students had to improve their language skills while also exposing themselves to different cultures. We also did a one sample C test, which also indicated that there was a significant level of agreement that they were prepared for cultural diversity. And these were some of the statements that were posed to the students. For example, the experience increased my intent in further opportunities for internationalization exchanges. So meaning that the experience that they had was positive, and they would like to participate more in these type of projects, and the experience introduced me to a different worldview. Of course, most of our students in at DUT would have not or had not traveled abroad or had not interacted with people beyond our country or beyond our province. And this opportunity provided them with an excellent opportunity. For example, they only thought that all people from China are Chinese. They got to learn a different aspects about the different cultures in China, which was a great opportunity for them. You can move on to the next one. And also, just the overall experience. We also did a one sample C test to determine the overall experience about one, the COIL project, and the course quality. Was the course quality up to the expected standard? And based on the responses and also on the analysis of the one sample C test, there was a significant level of agreement that was shown by students. As you can see, the overall and the quantity of the COIL module contributes to valuable learning experiences, which had the highest level of agreement at 4.44%, with most of the students indicating that they had the strongest level agreement, and one represents a disagreement, whereas four represents a strongly agreement, meaning that they were happy with how the course was prepared. And even they went as far as that they would recommend the course or the subject that includes COIL to other students, meaning that they enjoyed the interaction that they had. Even though there were slightly different cultures and different time zones, it was still an experience that they would think that it should be done with other students as well. I think because of time, this would be the last one. I'm not sure if there's anything else after this, Caroline. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Tendo. So I'm going to provide a very brief conclusion to our COIL project. So overall, our COIL virtual exchange projects actually are quite successful. And after the whole project, we started to realize the power of virtual exchange that brings upon students from both sides of our countries. So first of all, the virtual exchange actually provide a good opportunity to break the barriers or the boundaries, especially for countries such as China and South Africa, which are geographically distanced. So this virtual platform provide us a very good opportunity to put students together and have authentic communication with people who are coming from a very different culture. And also, this is a very rare opportunity for both China and South African students to have authentic intercultural communication. In the past, if students want to have authentic intercultural communication, they need to encounter people coming from another cultural background in real life. And I have to be honest, this opportunity is actually quite rare. And the virtual platform creates this opportunity for students to engage in this authentic dialogue, and it actually encouraged them to explore their self identities And also this project promotes inclusivity and cultural diversity, as mentioned by Tendo about the ethnicity of our participants. And moreover, the main focus of our project is to enhance cultural diversity and enhance cross-cultural communication. So this is actually empowering different voices from diverse cultural background. As Laura mentioned previously, most of the virtual exchange are actually quite Western-centric. So our approach is to encourage the Global South to engage more into the virtual exchange programs and to invite more diverse voices from other cultures to participate in cross-cultural communication as well. So this is all for our presentation. Here is the references. If you have any other questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Tendel and Kuei-yin. So we will have a Q&A session at the end of all the presentations. Yeah. So let's move on to the second presentation. Dr. Salome from the Bukidnon State University, Philippines.
Thank you. Am I audible, Professor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me share my slide first. Is my screen showing the slides already? Please confirm.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
You can try to turn it to
Yes.
the full screen mode. You can. Yeah.
Okay, there. Okay, so again, thank you very much to our dear professor who introduced me a while ago. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be at this time. Just like what was introduced, my name is Salome Escalona of Bukidnon State University. And this afternoon, because it's afternoon here in the Philippines, I'll be presenting my research entitled Grounding COIL in Local Realities, a Framework Proposal. A little backgrounder about COIL in our institution. Here at Bukidnon State University, or BUKSU, COIL is in its early stage. Our COIL project or activities began just this February, approximately 3 months before the end of the semester. So this research is an offshoot of the experiences of those who were involved with those COIL projects. So this research explored the integration of COIL within the context of Bukidnon State University, aiming to develop a responsive framework suitable for regional institutions like us. Okay, so the rise of COIL. Now, the internationalization of higher education has become increasingly strategic, particularly in the context of digital mediated global engagement. As mobility and cross-border collaboration shift toward virtual platforms, universities worldwide are called to equip learners not only with academic proficiency, but also with intercultural, digital, and collaborative competencies required for a globally interconnected world. Here in the Philippines, this drive for internationalization is supported by our Commission on Higher Education, which mandated the integration of internationalization in Philippine higher education, encouraging HEIs to embed global perspectives into our curricula, establish international partnerships, and develop programs that align with global standards and outcomes. Yet, there are limitations of traditional mobility. Conventional internationalization strategies often remain inaccessible to learners in geographically remote or resource-constrained settings due to financial limitations, infrastructural gaps, and unequal access to global networks. So what is the solution? COIL is a solution. In response to these disparities, COIL, am I still sharing my slide? I don't know, because everyone, because in my screen, it's not anymore showing.
Yes, yeah, we are. I'd like to.
Okay, wait a while. I have to
It's in slide
reshare.
2. We can slide down.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, so I'd like to continue. In response to these disparities, COIL has emerged as a scalable and inclusive alternative to physical mobility. COIL enables meaningful global engagement without requiring physical travels, making it well-suited for distance and online learning environments where equity and digital access are common concerns. Okay, so COIL in the Philippine context, this is now the challenge. And despite COIL, despite growing global interest, COIL adoption remains limited in the Philippines, particularly among regional state universities. At Bukidnon, COIL has been piloted through faculty-initiated collaborations. Preliminary fosters intercultural sensitivity, increases motivation to use English, and strengthens online collaboration skills. However, challenges persist, including technological limitations in the absence of a standardized framework for COIL planning, delivery, and assessment. There is thus a compelling need to design a context-sensitive COIL implementation framework tailored to the institutional realities of Bukidnon. So addressing these gaps, this study aims to achieve these 4 objectives. First, to examine faculty and student experiences with COIL activities. Second, to identify institutional and instructional barriers to effective implementation. Third, to analyze existing COIL models for transferable elements. And fourth, to develop a localized, responsive framework suited to the needs and capacities of Bukidnon. For the methodologies, this study adapted a qualitative descriptive research design appropriate for providing detailed accounts of participant experiences. Multiple data sources were incorporated, including FGDs, KII, institutional document analysis, and structured literature review. A total of 5 faculty members and 20 undergraduate students were selected through purposive sampling, chosen for their direct and meaningful experience in COIL. Faculty participants came from diverse disciplines, as did the student participants. Thematic analysis and data triangulation were employed to identify patterns and themes needed to answer the objectives of this study. Let's now delve into the experiences of faculty and student, or the answer to problem number 1. So you can see among faculty, those who partnered with experienced COIL practitioners found the collaboration significantly beneficial in designing their projects, describing it as a valuable form of professional development. One faculty member noted that his partner was not only a co-facilitator, but also a mentor and a coach, which helped build his confidence. Even faculty who had only attended COIL training but hadn't implemented a project yet shared that the concepts introduced during the training influenced their broader instructional practices, such as incorporating global case studies into the regular class. For the student experiences, a dominant theme was the value of intercultural exposure. They expressed excitement about communicating with students from countries such as Indonesia and Malaysia. However, they also encountered challenges in collaboration, particularly with asynchronous communication. Students noted issues such as inconsistent engagement and difficulty in clarifying meanings when responses were delayed by several days. Technological barriers were also found to be a concern, with many reporting unreliable internet access in our campus and dependence on mobile data, adding to the financial burden. But despite these challenges, the student described COIL as a transformative learning experience. Okay, so for number 2, institutional and instructional challenges. One of the foremost difficulty encountered by the respondents is finding suitable international partners, with faculty often relying on informal contacts. Another major issue was the misalignment in academic calendars and class schedules, particularly when trying to collaborate with institutions outside of Asia. This logistical misalignment can hinder active participation and lead to incredible learning experiences. Furthermore, faculty also highlighted a lack of uniform COIL implementation framework, which resulted in inconsistent experiences across programs, across departments. This suggests that current COIL practices at Bukidnon are largely shaped by individual faculty initiative rather than by a coordinated institutional strategy. Finally, insufficient teacher training and preparedness were also cited, with faculty feeling unsure how to design activities, assess intercultural learning, or co-teach with foreign partners, even after attending workshop. So these challenges underscore the need for a comprehensive, locally responsive COIL framework. Okay, for the third objective, global COIL models and transferable elements. The analysis of existing COIL frameworks revealed a growing diversity of approaches globally, commonly following a collaborative, project-based model. The Sony COIL Center framework is widely referenced, emphasizing faculty-to-faculty partnership, co-developed outcomes, and team-taught models in 3 phases: relationship building, course design, virtual exchange, and reflection. In Latin America and Europe, COIL is often part of larger international strategies. For example, countries like Spain and Mexico provide strong institutional support to encourage faculty participation. In Asia, countries such as Japan and Indonesia have started piloting COIL through government-backed programs, usually the faculty and supported by grants. Studies also highlight common challenges such as time zone differences and limited digital infrastructures that are often addressed by using flexible, student-centered approaches. So what are the key learnings? That successful COIL programs are usually embedded in institutional policies, offer systematic faculty training, technical support, and assessment rubrics. And second, that flexible frameworks are crucial for common challenges like time zone conflicts and digital infrastructure limitation. Okay, so drawing from those insights, a contextualized COIL implementation framework for Bukidnon State University is proposed. This framework is built on foundational elements, including institutional readiness, international partnerships, pedagogical design, student engagement, and evaluation. So it is composed of 5 phases. Phase 1 is institutional readiness and policy alignment, embedding COIL in policy curriculum and internationalization strategies with leadership support and technical infrastructure. Second phase is partner identification and co-development. This is when you identify suitable partners with compatible offerings, schedules, and tech capabilities. And this should be coordinated by the Odell and Ayalo units of Bukidnon State University. Phase 3 is instructional design and technology integration. Here, it is now developing learning materials, co-designing modules, and selecting a specific technology. Phase 4 is delivery and student engagement. The actual implementation focusing on intercultural collaboration, inclusive pedagogies, and session flexibility. And then phase 5, assessment, reflection, and scaling. This now includes the formative or the summative evaluations, the post-project reflections, and strategic planning for expansion. Now, to support faculty in the practical conduct of COIL projects, a detailed COIL implementation framework for teaching practice is also proposed. There are 7 steps. The first one is pre-engagement. Here, institutional orientation and faculty development is going to be done. Second one is partner identification and goal alignment, where UDEL unit assist in locating partners, prioritizing Asia for time zone, and co-designing goals. The third step is co-design of instructional materials and learning activities, jointly developing activities, integrating intercultural objectives, and using culturally responsive approaches. Fourth one is project launch and facilitation. Teachers become facilitators, monitoring interactions, scaffolding, mediating misunderstanding, using synchronous and asynchronous modes. The fifth one is monitoring and...
Hello, Dr. Salome.
Okay, I'm now
Hello?
going to... Yes.
Dr. Salome, can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you clearly.
Sorry for my interruption. Yeah, due to technical problem, we need to switch to another laptop right now. So would you mind wait 30 seconds?
Sure. You just give me the cue. Okay.
Okay. So you can start from this slide maybe.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
thank you.
I am now on the fifth step for teachers, to guide teachers in how to implement COIL. Again, is monitoring, and the fifth one is monitoring and support, where teachers act as facilitators, monitoring interactions, scaffolding, mediating misunderstanding. That one. The sixth one is assessment and reflection. Teachers provide technical, academic, and emotional support, encouraging inclusive participation and using structured reflection activities. And the last one is post-project reporting and knowledge sharing. So this is now assessing content, collaboration, intercultural awareness and communication skills, using co-developed rubrics, post-project reflection session. So a visual representation of this framework is presented there in figure 1. That's now the flow chart showing the COIL implementation steps. These were already discussed earlier. Okay, now to my conclusion. This study demonstrates that effective COIL implementation at Buksu requires the integration of global best practices with localized strategies. The lack of an institutional framework has resulted in fragmented experiences for faculty and students, highlighting the need for structured support systems, digital infrastructure, and international collaboration. Another one is that the context-sensitive framework proposed in this research offers a scalable and inclusive approach to institutionalizing COIL. That this framework can serve as a practical and adaptable guide for other regional universities, not only in the Philippines, who are facing similar resource constraints, but also aspiring toward global engagement and equitable access to international learning opportunities. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that I'll be able to COIL with you, or that our institution will have that opportunity to do COIL collaborations with everyone. These are my references. Again, thank you very much. The questions will be entertained later, right? Seems like we cannot hear you, Professor. You can unmute yourself.
reflect on their coaching experiences, what happened instead was that the majority of them wrote instead about their experiences as co-researchers. So we draw on those reflections, and we also draw on our facilitation experience to examine how role clarity, effective safety, and intercultural communication shape equitable participation in virtual exchange. So now I'm going to give you a bit of background. So we should stay on this slide, which is up at the moment. So essentially, the virtual exchange sat within a 12-week module, which was called Contemporary Issues in Education. And in total, we had 24 undergraduates from UAD and UOG to explore and also co-present on key global education topics that the students actually chose themselves. So we let loose and we said, what do you want to present on? What do you want to research on? So they chose things, for example, like special educational needs and disabilities, also mental health issues, gender issues, and inclusive pedagogy. The module did have 2 summative assessments. So we had the presentations, and we also had a written portfolio, and the students had to write about 6 topics that were presented during the course of the module, including their own topic. And this was grounded in a coffee model. So I'll let Alex explain that a little bit. So community of inquiry.
Community of inquiry. I tell you, I'm going to do more. You'll have, if you come to tomorrow's session on navigating boundaries, I'm going to talk a lot more about the coffee model, because I'm not sure it's something that is used, this community of inquiry model. So I think it's almost a session in itself. But it's, I mean, in a nutshell, it's enabling students to tackle quite sensitive topics together in a way in which they feel safe. So when I talk tomorrow about boundaries, one of the key boundaries is actually how much can you say when you're in different contexts, different political contexts. You could be talking about the same topic. For example, with UAD, it's an Mohammedan university. So we had some very sort of interesting contexts in which our students were
to navigate.
They had to navigate that.
Yeah.
So
we'll talk about that. Yeah. But essentially, grounded in coffee meant that we aim to foster critical dialogue, empathy, and also intercultural literacy by centering student voice and also shared inquiry. Next slide, please, Alex.
The other thing is, just before we jump onto the next slide, and in relation to the coffee, because Maria and I both work in education, we're in the School of Education, Health and Science, but we're very much, pedagogy is we're sort of embedded within that. I think we draw a lot on the sort of Vygotskian idea, that zone of proximal development where you challenge your students, but don't leave them floundering. So we want to make them feel safe, but not necessarily comfortable. And that's quite a sort of Piaget. Well, that's well, not with the zone of proximal development.
No, but messy thinking. Well, yeah. Messy thinking. All right. Okay. So
it's great fun. We have these conversations.
Yeah. You can tell Alex and I have worked for a long time together. But, as I mentioned earlier, this was a novel inclusion, having the doctoral students. But this was essentially in line with Indonesian higher education reforms, in particular, Merdeka Belajar, Campus Merdeka. And their inclusion as academic coaches reflected a dual ambition. So to empower undergraduates and also to provide professional development for the doctoral students. And to prepare them for this role, what we did was we offered them an online coaching workshop, which outlined key responsibilities for them and also introduced peer support principles. Next slide, please, Alex. So our methodology is that of reflective inquiry. So we both adopted a reflective practitioner approach informed by qualitative analysis of the doctoral students' actual reflective essays. We also took facilitation notes, and we also did some post-module reflections. And as I mentioned earlier, although these essays were intended to assess the coaching process, many instead discussed the shared experience of researching alongside undergraduates. And this pivot actually prompted us to reflect on our own assumptions as facilitators and to consider the effective and also the cultural dynamics that influence how tasks are interpreted in cross-cultural partnerships. Okay, next slide, please, Alex. So,
Let's see where we're going with this.
yeah. So we now present our findings and discussion, and there are three. Okay, so let's go to the first one. So next slide, please, Alex. So the first one is about coaching or co-researching. So we mentioned this unexpected outcome. And essentially what this did was we felt it blurred the lines between expert and novice. And it disrupted this presumed hierarchy between postgraduate and undergraduate learners. And while the coaching role was actually framed by us, the Global North facilitators, as empowering and relational, an opportunity to develop leadership through peer support, doctoral students, on the other hand, might have interpreted the experience primarily as a joint learning venture. And on first thought, we felt, maybe epistemic modesty could be claimed here. And this is often observed in the global South academic cultures. And this is where authority is typically vested in formal teaching roles rather than in peer mentoring. So next slide. So we thought, well, okay, their reflective essays then might not actually indicate misunderstanding, but rather a culturally grounded redefinition of their role. And they position themselves as students first, not supervisors. And this reorientation illustrates how pedagogical intentions might be interpreted through different cultural frameworks. And it highlights the importance of viewing student responses not through a deficit lens, but through a culturally responsive interpretive frame. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so the second outcome is about communication confidence and language anxiety. So we used English, okay? And remember, our colleagues and our peers were Indonesian. So the use of English as the primary language of instruction created both access, but also constraint, linguistic, emotional, and cultural. And although no doctoral student actually expressed that they felt anxiety during the program, our facilitation experience and also our post-module reflections revealed a reluctance to ask clarifying questions or seek further explanations about the coaching role or assessment requirements. And as I mentioned, this was already our second iteration. And in the first evaluation of the initial VE project, several undergraduate students from UAD already reported fear of sounding wrong in English. And this highlighted the cognitive and emotional load of using a second language. And there is actually previous research, there's a lot of research actually on foreign language anxiety. And it is said in this research that fear of negative evaluation inhibits participation and also risk-taking. So therefore, silence in this context might not reflect disengagement, but rather self-protection. You don't want to speak out if you think you're going to be called out, okay? And this is a strategy to avoid miscommunication or also embarrassment. Next slide, please, Alex. So further, norms of politeness and academic hierarchy in the Indonesian educational context may discourage direct questioning, especially in relation to us. I mean, who's going to ask us a question? But we're not scary, are we? So the idea of querying a task set by lecturers might actually conflict with expectations of deference. And thus, communicative restraint should not be viewed as a lack of engagement, but rather something that is culturally and emotionally mediated. Next slide, please, Alex. So this is the last outcome: assumptions and power in task design. So as Global North educators, we design the task under certain assumptions, Number one, that doctoral students would understand reflective writing in the same way that we did. Okay, and number two, that they would actually feel confident in asking questions, including clarifying questions if they were confused. However, these assumptions are rooted in Western academic values of critique, clarity, and communicative assertiveness. And this expectation further reflects a low context communication style common in Anglophone contexts where meaning is made explicit and inquiry is encouraged. In high context cultures, such as that of Indonesia, meaning is often inferred through context hierarchy and relational cues. Also, student-teacher relationships are shaped by deference and respect for hierarchy. So asking for clarification, especially when one is positioned as a leader, like our doctoral students were, might actually be seen as exposing inadequacy or disrespect. Next slide, please, Alex. So by interpreting silence or deviation from the brief as a problem, we risk positioning Global South students as lacking. So in doing so, we actually reproduce deficit perspectives, evaluating participation through a Western lens without attending to alternative communicative norms. And you probably have heard of Baba's critique of the fixity of colonial discourse, and this has to do with a tendency to normalize rather one epistemic framework at the expertise of others. And we can also refer to Kimberly Crenshaw here and her theory of intersectionality. And this should remind us that educational experiences are shaped by many different factors, intersecting factors of language, nationality, institutional power, and also role status. And the doctoral students were actually navigating multiple, often contradictory identity positions. So, for example, they were Global South researchers in a North-led module, albeit as part of a co-created project. They were also non-native English speakers, and they were postgraduate students who were expected to perform as coaches. So it is really possible that role confusion was not a sign of disengagement or misunderstanding, but an expression of careful negotiation across multiple, often contradictory identity positions. So very complex for them. So even our assumption of clarity was culturally loaded. And what is explicit to one educator might actually be ambiguous or inaccessible to another. And the feedback loop that we expected, where students would ask if they were confused, might have been broken down, not due to unwillingness, but because of asymmetries in cultural capital and also emotional safety. And these dynamics are rarely visible in course design templates, and yet they profoundly shape participation. And silence might not have meant, I don't know, but rather, I cannot safely ask. So ultimately, what first appeared to be a misalignment between task and response revealed a deeper need for humility in intercultural teaching. And as Baba suggests, it's the third space of cultural negotiation where meaning is not transmitted, but instead co-constructed. So our responsibility really was not to enforce understanding, but to make space for its emergence. Okay, so now we have some steps towards more equitable and also dialogic virtual exchange. Next slide, please, Alex. Okay, so this is what we think now. Firstly, pre-module orientation and relationship building to cultivate trust and also psychological safety. In our first iteration, actually, the learners had time to get to know each other because our Indonesian colleagues actually visited the United Kingdom, and we had the opportunity to visit Indonesia as well. But that didn't happen in the second iteration. And we thought that it would be okay and how wrong we were, actually. We also need iterative clarification points throughout the program where students are actually encouraged to reinterpret their roles because it's very complex, okay? And also their tasks in conversation with facilitators. So this is about normalizing clarification as a collaborative responsibility and not something that is remedial. And then we also highlight informal peer-led digital spaces or liminal spaces. For example, let them talk on WhatsApp. Let them say, oh yeah, do you know what, Alex, he's okay, but that Maria, she's pretty strict, you know, stuff like that. But they can ask unsafe questions, more importantly, within those spaces and explore ideas beyond institutional formality. We also need to have dialogic modeling by staff, including public reflection on uncertainty. It's okay not to know, for example. An open discussion of misunderstandings and collaborative assessment design, which is something that we're really looking forward to, actually. We're undergoing a big curriculum design project at our university. So there's a shakeup happening. And following Holly and Steiner, which is a brilliant source, we affirm that a safe space, it's not always comfortable, but it must be dialogic, inclusive, and built on reciprocal attentiveness. Facilitators must not act as guardians of clarity, but as co-navigators of uncertainty. So we're on our last slide now. So in conclusion, virtual exchange, and feel free to hop in, by the way. Is much about relational pedagogy as it is about content. And rather than viewing divergence from intended outcomes as failures, we propose embracing such moments as sites of pedagogical learning. Divergence should invite conversation and not correction, and to support students in becoming future-ready global graduates, which is the theme of this conference, or certainly one of the themes. We must not only develop their capacity to speak across borders, but ensure that they are empowered to do so in environments that are inclusive, relational, and also reflexive. And this means challenging assumptions about communication and expertise and creating conditions in which learning emerges through shared negotiation. And finally, equitable virtual exchange. So this is going to lead to a project that we're going to call EVE, EVE, okay? Depends not only on digital tools or curriculum design, but on a deeper commitment to ethical listening across cultures, languages, and epistemologies. And that's it from us. Thank you very much. The next slide are our references.
And of course, EVE does operate on a number of different layers, different levels. Yeah. And that's what we were trying to do with the undergraduates, the doctoral level students, and the facilitators, you know, ourselves. So there was an interesting dynamic. And also I don't know how many of you have ever been in any vertical learning environments. Anyone? I have. Has anybody else been in a vertical learning environment where you have maybe, you know, school where you have where you have children who are 7 and children who are 11 working together in the same class?
Classroom.
Is that something? No, you wouldn't have that. Okay, so that's a really interesting area of educational pedagogy that may be worth thinking about and learning about.
Okay, thanks ever so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Connie. Thank you for moderating.
Yeah.
Feel free to share your question on the chat room. And what about here? Yeah, so since we have some audience here, do you have any questions for our online presenters or for each other? Yep, Emma, please.
Maybe just one question about working with students from high context cultures. Both of you mentioned that the students respect the hierarchy and are very reluctant to speak up, right? So I'm wondering whether, you know, you took any measures to encourage the students to speak more openly, and what kind of impact is their reluctance have on students that are from low
Excellent. Thank you. I'll hold it just in case Alex wants to chime in, but essentially that's why we had the doctoral students, acting as coaches, because as I mentioned earlier, in the first iteration of the project, our students and the Indonesian students were able to meet each other in real life, but in the second iteration, they were not able to do that. So when UAD approached us with the idea of involving doctoral students, we said, why not? But we don't want them. We actually explicitly said, we don't want them just to do research. We'd like for them to act as coaches. And we felt that actually by introducing that peer coaching element, that would help them to develop their confidence and also their research skills at the same time, so that even if they hadn't met our English students in person, that they would feel that they had much more support, if you like. So Alex did mention Vygotskian social cultural perspective there. We also took care to work with departments at UAD that we have worked with previously. So there was familiarity, if you like, at the staff level. And we thought that we had actually kind of like addressed the issue actually of not having that face-to-face initial meeting because it worked well in the first iteration. And we thought that the coaches would be supportive in that. But I'll hand over now to Alex.
One of the things that I love about coming to conferences and just sitting and listening, and I make hundreds of notes, but occasionally there'll be 2 or 3 hooks in there that I can take forward. And one of the things that I was thinking of, Maria's just alluded to it, is that familiarity with some of the staff. And I think that's enabled us to better understand now going into this third iteration, how to work with the different students. And it made me think, I don't know, I'm hoping this expression isn't offensive in any way, but there does seem to be a tendency for COIL promiscuity, where we just go from one group of students to the next. Oh, let's get some let's work with some Mexican students today, and tomorrow let's work with some Indonesians and some English and maybe some Spanish. And what we lose with that is an ability to build up those relationships. And virtual exchange actually is the importance of it at its core is this relational aspect. If we don't have it, why are we doing it? Because, and this brings me to a question that I have, but maybe now's not the right time, but it's around intercultural communication.
But can I also talk about, so I also wanted to say that at the University of Gloucestershire, we use Microsoft apps. So we have teams. So we actually set up the teams just for them, and we put them into different channels so that they could communicate with each other and out of their own initiative, because I think the Indonesian students were much more familiar with, for example, Google and also WhatsApp. So this developed kind of like just naturally, that they actually decided, oh, we'll communicate with each other using WhatsApp. So this was a liminal space where they could actually talk to each other and develop those relationships outside the glare. Of the classroom.
outside of the lecturer gaze, if you like, which I think is really helpful. So I love that, that notion of those liminal spaces to be able to open opportunities to afford that chance for them to work in spaces away from the facilitators, away from us. Yes, of course.
Yeah, but at the same time as well, when those spaces weren't working, teams enabled 1 or 2 students, I think, because we had 6 different groups, to come up to us and say, we haven't yet heard from our peers. And actually it was the English students that were, not the Indonesian ones. So I don't know if you want to add to that, Alex.
No, I think we should maybe there's probably some other questions here.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And to all the speakers, thanks so much for your sharing. So, speaking about that, maybe just to follow up on that issue where perhaps, some members have not heard from the other group members from another country, perhaps potentially. How do you leave it to the representative, be like the PhD students in your side to help resolve that? You help resolve that, leave it to them to resolve it themselves, and within the group, do they escalate it more to the PhD student who's helping facilitate, or does it actually involve one of you to step in to actually take part? Because I've been involved, thanks to Catherine's help, with a couple of COILs myself, where I have tried to stay away as much as possible and step in as and when I need to, and I really always encourage them to. And thankfully, my facilitator on the other side of the Atlantic, or Pacific, should I say, had a similar approach where it was quite laissez-faire, where don't get me involved unless you've already tried or you've already taken some initiative, and yet that has failed, please come to me. But at the same time, you need to run the right discretion, not to leave it too late, because you don't want to impact the project and the overall outcomes as well. So, but of course, me also taking the opportunity along with my co-facilitator, whenever we meet every week, to step in and ask how things going as well, and to prompt that as well. So yeah, back to the original question is, how much involvement do you get in if you see some of these issues, and is there sort of like a rule of thumb where you do maybe step in to parachute in to get involved if need be from either of the speakers?
Yeah, I think in this Q&A, we can probably divulge. I think in this Q&A, we can probably divulge a little bit more about how the module is organized. Oh, yeah, but yeah, so essentially it was a 12-week module, as we explained, but in the first half of it, we actually modeled pedagogy.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think it's important to say that. So although the students chose all the topics, they told us, hey, Alex and Maria and Buega and Buintan, etc., we want you to talk about X. So,
so
and we
young carers or
and we only had like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
So we didn't know what topics we were going to get, but we would role model the topics.
So and so I think our role modeling went some way towards inspiring them as well and encouraging them to research. However, this is, of course, it's high stakes because it's a credit-bearing module. It has 2 summative assessments at the end. The students have to present, which means that they have to research, and they also have to write a written assessment at the end of it. So I think the doctoral students had it easy because they only had to do a reflective essay. However, having said that, I think certainly by the time it gets to the end of our stint, the first 4 or 5 weeks where we're presenting and modeling, and if they haven't yet heard from someone in the group, that is when we will step in and we'll say, hey, oi, what you doing? Why haven't you spoken to so-and-so yet? Yeah.
But just to add to this, I think it's taken me full circle, because I was interested in this back in, I think 2017 was the first time I thought about this. This is before I knew there was a community, telecommunication. I had no idea. I thought this was quite an original thing. Hey, let's get students work. Or, first of all, I was thinking in schools, getting school children to work together. And so did a project with Canadian school, and then with the University of Girona. But before myself and my colleague in Girona knew that this was a thing more globally, and it was pre-pandemic, we'd conceptualized it very differently. We conceptualized it as peer-to-peer mentoring, not really as COIL or virtual exchange as we understand it now. we'd envisaged it as a way for, in our instance, teacher trainees to act as peers and sort of support, but virtually, because they were both training to be teachers, both having placement experiences, different training, and virtually they were paired up individually at the individual level and at the team level. So again, it was working on 2 layers. So I think this idea of working at different layers is really interesting. And of course, for the doctoral students, this provides a great opportunity for them to gain skills as well. And we should all be, you know, at our respective universities, if you do have doctoral students or MA students, you know, really we should be including them in teaching, giving them as many opportunities as possible.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so I think we still have time for the 2 last questions. Yeah, so maybe one of the question, it's for our online presenters. Let's see, Tendel, yeah, and Caroline, your team. Yeah, because in your presentation, you mentioned that COIL projects helps challenge and also alter some of the students' existing cultural stereotypes and biases. So may I know, what's the result of that? So what are the existing stereotypes and how do they feel after the COIL project?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, please hold a second. All right. I think our findings are very similar to the second presenter in this panel session, where so Chinese culture is actually of a high context culture where students are quite reserved to their opinions. And one of our focus is the willingness to communicate, because most of the Chinese students are reluctant to express their ideas, especially when it comes to some of the controversial topics. So initially, when we began our COIL session, we found that Chinese students and South African students are not going quite well in communication, because Chinese students are usually remain silent in a group discussion, and they tend to send out messages by texting or sending out emails rather than verbally express their ideas. And when there comes to conflicts, Chinese students usually tend to reserve their opinion, and they probably don't like confrontations. We also get this idea from South African students' reflective journals, where they usually report that their Chinese partners are quite silent. They're not willing to speak. So sometimes this kind of reluctant to communicate are usually interpreted as non-responsive, not being quite active in the project. But actually, after the whole COIL session, when we explain about the high context and low context culture, I think many of the students from South Africa started to understand why Chinese students have this kind of communication style. It's not representing that they are not interested in the project. It's just a kind of communication style that Chinese learners usually had, where they reserve their opinion. They respect their partners, so they never want to have any confrontation when there is disagreement in the group discussion. And also, most of the Chinese speakers find South African partners are very verbal in the discussion. And it takes some time for them to get used to this kind of communication style, because in the past, when they have conflicts, Chinese learners usually tend to have this solved by texting to each one another, or sometimes they probably go to their teachers to ask for the suggestions. But when it comes to this COIL project, we find our South African partners are very verbal. They tend to put everything on the table and express their opinion openly. So I think this is also a very big challenge for Chinese learners, where they need to confront with this kind of a disagreement and seek for solutions when it comes to disagreement. So actually, after the whole project, when we ask our students to write reflective diary, we found like most of the Chinese students report that this is a very challenging program for them because they started to learn how to deal with conflicts verbally rather than texting each other or seek help from their teachers. And also from South African side, I think they started to get a kind of understanding of high context culture like Chinese culture. And we also got lots of participants from Indonesia where we share some kind of similarity. So I think this is actually one of the major challenges and major, I would say, like gains that the students receive from this participating in this COIL project.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
And my last question is actually for our second presenter, Salome. Yeah, and I apologize for the technical issue just now. In your presentation, you mentioned one thing that's very interesting. That's an entirely new framework in your university. So can you tell us one uniqueness about that framework? Yeah, the dual layer implementation framework. Yeah. Can she hear me? Actually, I'm not sure whether she can hear me.
I think I hear you clearly.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, is the question as to whether what is new with the framework?
Yeah. That framework.
Yeah, no.
Because just now we can't hear you very clearly.
Yes. Actually, we still do not have a framework. That is why that particular framework is something new. Is something new to us. Our COIL projects were actually done without framework. Our teachers just do it. Our partners, we are lucky. Some of the COIL collaborators were lucky to have partners who already have experiences with COIL, and so that partner now has become the coach, providing providing guide as to how the COIL is going to proceed. However, there are also those whose partner do not have any experience with COIL. So I believe that one is new to us. No, the COIL framework that I have just introduced is something new to us, basically very new because we don't have a COIL framework yet.
Yeah.
But basically,
developing.
yeah, but basically based on the experiences, based on the related literature or the review of literatures of the studies where we benchmark or where I have benchmarked or where I have reviewed, those are essentially what they are already doing, and then we just contextualize that one. We just arrange that one. I arrange that one according to how the teacher, the respondents. Yes, based on the answers of the respondents as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And yep.
Do we have more time?
Sure, last one.
Okay, so this is one to, oh, sorry. So this is one to any of the speakers or all of the speakers. I mean, you can keep it brief, but I know that the focus of the panel here is around quality intercultural education and for future ready graduates, but it's the intercultural aspect that I'm quite interested in. Just to hear very briefly from as many of the panelists today as possible is, what do each of you individually feel is the most important in your eyes intercultural aspect of intercultural communication that you think is most important, and why? I just wonder if there's any difference between any of the panelists.
Yeah, maybe let's start with Catherine.
It's about the understanding of each other culture. For example, why do Chinese students, they are silent, but in a asynchronous environment they are not, because they make use of that opportunity to think more of their ideas and then to write better. And then for our study, it is on the contrary. but then they find out their native counterparts do not respond to messages. So I think it is you need to understand each other well and be patient. So to break through the cross-cultural barrier. And so luckily now we have technology, but some of my students also missed the time during pandemic about our physical presence. So BE and the physical connection, how to let culture transform and leverage on different types of pedagogy.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. And Caroline, do you have any suggestion about that intercultural definition?
Okay, all right. So speaking of which, we're actually discussed about this before because our collaboration is between South Africa and China. When we get started our program and when we get started to do the literature review, we find that this kind of collaboration is quite rare in virtual exchange, where China partner up with global South country, especially countries like South Africa. So the reason why we think this is quite important for virtual exchange and intercultural communication is because in mainland China, especially in higher education system, when we talk about intercultural communication, people automatically thinking of partnering up with Western country like the US or the UK. So many of the global South countries are actually underrepresented in this context. And as a result, when we deal with this kind of topic with our students, especially year one students, we found like they have lots of stereotypical ideas or sometimes even biased ideas towards cultures from the African continent. I think this is not because they are biased in nature, but they are not exposed to this kind of culture. They never had this authentic experience of talking to a people coming from Africa. So we deem this opportunity is actually very valuable for students from China because probably in their life, no one would ever have the opportunity to pay a visit to South Africa. But the virtual platform provide them this opportunity to have authentic dialogue with people coming from this culture and to know about each other through this project. And not to mention, this is a project-based learning, so they need to work closely with each other, and there are lots of social culture tasks embedded in the program. So intercultural communication to us is more about bringing those underrepresented culture into this context and encourage more like diverse cultures to engage in this dialogue rather than when we think about intercultural communication, we would like automatically think about those mainstream so-called mainstream cultures. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Caroline. And Salome, do you have any ideas or insight about this?
I'm sorry, but am I right that the question is about the importance of intercultural communication amongst COIL students?
But just one, if there was one thing, which would be the top thing for you?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I also agree with the previous speaker.
Pinaka-importanteng halaga sa COIL?
Professor Caroline on the knowledge on the development of intercultural understanding amongst learners, especially in the Philippines. I also agree with her saying that not every in the Philippines, not just in China, but also in the Philippines, not everybody is able to afford, or should I say, not when all of the students, because we come from the regional part of the country, we don't have the luxury. Our students do not have the luxury to go to other countries and engage in in internationalization activities. This one, I believe that COIL, I know that COIL, because of COIL, we are able to converse with people from others. Our students are able to converse with other students from different countries. And so the development of intercultural knowledge. And this intercultural knowledge is very much important because, of course, no, we are able to understand perfectly, understand that there is going to become a mutual understanding amongst our students, making them global, no, creating in them that global citizenship. No, through COIL, our students are able to experience that one. They will understand other people. They are also going to be understood by other students. So in a way, it reduces cultural misunderstanding and conflict and becoming them global citizen. I hope I answered the question. I hope I answered the question.
You did, but again, it raises so many interesting questions and future possible. I mean, is there a, you know, we could even start talking about a global elite, you know, is there COIL poverty? You know, in Indonesia, you have 6,000 inhabited islands. You know, so there's a kind of digital divide.
Yeah, I guess
we
could continue during our coffee break in the next room. Yeah. So thank you very much, and let's give your hand a big hand to yourself. Yeah. So that's all for this session, and feel free to join us for next session and also tomorrow's session. Please also, if you can, please also fill up the questionnaires to give us some feedback on this virtual or hybrid conference. Yeah, thank you very much, and see you guys soon. See you all soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
You all.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.